Welcome to another episode of Happiness on Tap. Today we have a truly inspiring guest with us. Dr. Jeffrey Scales is a seasoned dermatologist with over 25 years of experience, most of which has been at his very own practice, the North Carolina Center for Dermatology. His philosophy is simple. Your care is the heart and soul of our practice. We seek to resolve issues of the skin, hair, and nails through a variety of medical treatments that work to provide restoration and healing. Dr. Scales is dedicated to resolving the medical aspects of skin, hair, and nail disease that will help highlight and celebrate the best you. He's made it his mission to address skincare concerns, particularly those affecting people of color. From tackling issues like razor bumps and skin cancers to providing innovative and inclusive solutions, Dr. Scales is a true trailblazer in his field. Recently, he opened Clearskin and Wellness Aesthetics, a practice dedicated to skincare wellness. It's more than just a clinic. It's a sanctuary for personalized care and transformative experiences. Hello, and welcome back to the Happiness on Tap podcast, where guests dive deep into the vulnerable experiences that contribute to their happiness. I'm Leanne Herron. I am a certified life and health coach, owner of Finding Resilience with Leanne, and the creator and host of this podcast. Thank you so much for joining us for Nurturing Skin and Soul with Dr. Jeffrey Scales. Hello, Dr. Scales. Thank you so much for joining me. How are you today?
Thank you for having me today. I'm looking forward to our conversation.
I am too. And I'm interested in learning about what all you do. I looked at your website. It's got a lot of treatments that you offer, so I'm really excited.
Yes, we offer quite a range of options for people who come in for both health and wellness.
Wonderful. Through his extensive practice, Dr. Scales has observed and recognized the significant gaps in skincare solutions tailored to diverse skin types. Motivated by a passion for inclusivity and a commitment to serve his community, he embarks on a mission to revolutionize skincare by curating products specifically designed to address the unique need of individuals with melatonin-rich skin. Dr. Scales treats numerous challenges faced by many people of color, including skin cancer, hair loss treatment, and nail disease. He is dedicated to inclusivity, innovation, and patient care, has made him a trailblazer in the field of dermatology. Through his commitment to addressing overlooked skincare concerns and providing tailored solutions, he continues to make a profound impact on the lives of individuals of all skin types. Recently, Dr. Scales has embarked on an exciting new chapter in his illustrious career by opening Clearskin and Wellness Aesthetics, a cutting-edge practice dedicated to skincare and holistic wellness. With a keen understanding of the unique needs of the diverse skin types, Dr. Scales brings his experience and passion for inclusivity to the forefront of his practice. Let's get started. What inspired you to specialize in dermatology, especially focusing on skincare solutions for people of color?
Well, I think it's a very good question, and I think it speaks specifically to dermatology as a field and society in general. I think if you were to look at most dermatology textbooks over the last 40 or 50 years, you would notice an interesting phenomenon that the bulk of the pictures and descriptions revolve around a very limited group of people who these diseases affect. So if I were someone coming from outer space and happened to land and look at a dermatology textbook, I would think that there's really only one group of people, for the most part, that get skin diseases. Yet we have a very rich and exciting and diverse population in the United States, and it has always been that way, even prior to the arrival of the settlers from
Mhm.
Europe. It was already a diverse population with people of color who live here. So the fact that as I was going through my dermatology training, I realized that there are some things that seem to have been neglected that affect broad swaths of the population that just don't seem to get the same attention, be it as a result of funding issues, such as certain diseases tend to attract a certain amount of funding, and consequently you get results from funding, as well as issues of socioeconomics, people who are less likely to have types of insurance and things like that tend to be neglected a bit more. So I found that very obvious observation to be interesting, and I felt like part of my role as a physician is to address needs for people that have problems. And so oftentimes when I'm treating patients, I'm looking at it from two perspectives. I'm looking at it from the perspective of making sure that I am addressing the medical need appropriately. Am I making the right decision about this medicine or this procedure? But also, I have sort of, for lack of a better word, chosen myself to say that I want to make sure that I'm the equalizer, that to those who are maybe less fortunate by socioeconomics, race, culture, that they also should have an opportunity to have access to healthcare that's the equivalent to what the average American might get. So that's how I ended up in that particular space, focusing on that. Dermatology is a great field. I find it very interesting. I'm very visually oriented in my, you have your senses, and someone would say, which sense is the strongest for you? And mine, for me, it's definitely visuals. If you go through my office, I have pieces of artwork. I have some copies of some great artists like George O'Keeffe and Matisse, and then I have local artists who have done things for me, and I have it all throughout my office. And I am very focused on how something looks. That matters a lot to me. So that was something that drew me to the field of dermatology. It's not always hard to figure out that there is a problem and that the problem can be seen. And there are approaches to taking care of it. Whereas, for instance, if you're working with cardiology or if you're working with some of the other fields, you have to imagine what that looks like. Or perhaps you use an ultrasound or CT or something, some kind of invasive imaging that allows you to see other things. But I like being able to see what the problem was. So that's what drew me into the field for from the very beginning. I was originally a pediatrician and I practiced for a number of years. And I realized that my interest in dermatology was something I wanted to pursue. And I was fortunate enough to be able to train and to go off and to become a dermatologist. And I've been very happy with that decision.
Wow, I think that is wonderful. We have a little bit in common and with visual aesthetics being something that is very important to you. I am the same way in my office, although you can't see it. My walls are completely covered in art from local artists. Same with my home.
Yes.
I find great joy in being surrounded by art and imagery, and it brings me peace and happiness. So I'm glad we have that connection. And I really love that you saw the need and you did something about it. Medicine is taking a while to catch up to women.
Very much
However,
so. I have a
that
daughter who's in medical school, and she reminds me, she's very much a person. She's like me in a female version and then on steroids. She reminds me, she said, Dad, there's so much about women that we don't know. Like, we don't even know what starts birth and these sorts of things are, and I thought about, yes, there have been great gaps of neglect in that regard too, with women and, less people who are been more marginalized in our American society over the last 250 years. So, yes, we need people that are prepared to answer some of these very important questions. Those are very important questions.
I'm glad to hear too that she's, coming to you and discussing that. She sees the need, and maybe that will be a direction she takes as well as really addressing the need that they don't really seem to get in medical school. Um, so
Well,
go ahead.
it's I think, but I do think that medical school has evolved quite a bit from when I was there. For instance, she's gone to the same medical school that my wife and I went to. We met in
Mhm.
medical school. And the evolution of the curriculum has been fantastic. I think that they've done a really good job of changing things and evolving things and bringing some of these issues to the forefront. I was listening to someone talk just recently, this morning, in fact, on a national public radio station, and they were talking about a show called Throughline, and Throughline was discussing the 14th Amendment. And what does the 14th Amendment have to do with anything I'm saying? The person pointed out, who was a historian, he said, look, the 14th Amendment came out 12 generations ago, and that it really only has been the last generation or two that you've included, at least half the population or more, such as people who are people of color and also women. And so you've had 10 generations of a particular way of things being done, and you've had two of it making an attempt to try to correct itself. And so things sometimes take a long time to change because the history of things has taken so long for something to be a certain way. Yes, it's great to see the evolution of this. And there are some people would argue, well, maybe it's been too much. We've been doing this for 50 years. That's just too long. Well, 12 generations is a long time for a lot of to think about. So maybe it would take 12 generations more for the course to correct itself and for some of the great, wonderful things that appear in the Constitution, Bill of Rights, to be realized for everyone that's a citizen, all citizens.
I agree. I agree. Can agree more. Needs to be a little faster, but we got to take what we get and do what we can and to do our part and educate people, which is, you know, the big reason why I started a podcast to begin with is because I have met so many wonderful people in different um, areas of medicine, alternative and Western medicine, that I want to help get their benefit out to a greater number of people. I've spent a big part of my life just raising kids, going to work, rinse and repeat. And I didn't know a lot of things were even available until I was seeking them. And so now I want to, help be part of the solution and not part of the problem, and be able to help these people build and grow their business as well as help the people who are seeking their services. It's very important to me to be an educator, bring that information to the forefront.
I like that philosophy.
Thank you. Can you share some specific challenges that people with melatonin-rich skin face and how your practice addresses these issues?
Well, I think there are diseases, the bulk of the diseases, 99.99% of the diseases that we deal with the skin affect people of all skin types. They may, in fact, what we characterize the different skin types on the basis of how much melanin one has. So there's a scale called the Fitzpatrick scale, and it goes anywhere from 1 to 6. 1 being a person with very, very white skin, and 6 being a person with very, very dark skin, and everything in between. And so there are diseases that tend to appear in different types of Fitzpatrick skin in different ways. So, for instance, if you have a person who is very light, who is a Fitzpatrick 1, and they have an autoimmune disease such as vitiligo, where the pigment is removed, they don't have a lot of pigment to start with, and you may not notice the disease as much. I have run across several patients like that, where a person may be very light, but you can't really tell the fact that they are lighter in some areas than other because it's not as painfully obvious. So that's one example. A second example might be that if a person is very dark and they have redness to their skin, inflammation, it may not appear as easily in their skin by visualization, then it might appear in someone who's lighter.
Hmm.
So both those are extremes of examples of describing people who are different than, say, the middle of the road patients that we might see in some of our typical textbooks. So each of those scenarios can lead to misdiagnosis and maybe delayed diagnosis and perhaps bad medical choices because you're not able to observe as easily things that you might in different types of skin.
That's interesting. And this is just kind of something that caught my attention, that I'm sure you definitely have experience with. A few years back ago, I had chronic hives for like 3 months. Looked like I had chickenpox all the time, head to toe, tongue swelling, and it would continue to get more and more severe. Um, and my doctor kept sending me, all over the place. Go to an allergist, go to a rheumatoid arthritis doctor. At no time did any one doctor ever ask me what my stress level was. And I kind of ended up ruling it for myself,
Mm-hmm.
that because I could finally tell when it was getting ready to come on, that I was really, really stressed out. And so I was like, oh, okay, I wonder how much this has to do with stress because everything else had been ruled out. But it was just kind of frustrating, as I've become more educated as a health and life coach, how stress is probably 90% of the factors that I start with people, um, and how doctors don't ask those questions.
It's an
So what
interesting
is
observation. Yeah.
your experience with, um, seeing those kind of skin issues from stress?
That's a very good question, and that's a tough question to answer. I give this example. If and it, we live in a very technologically focused society, information coming at us from all different ways, and it leads to a very stressful life, as many people will describe it. But I give this example to my patients sometimes. If you were to go back 50 years, let's say 70 years, where the bulk of the population lived in a more agrarian society, and your livelihood and your survival depended upon how good of a farmer you were. And you may be a great farmer, and yet you may not get rain that season, or you may not create enough crops to help feed your family, or to be able to keep a roof over your head. While those societies were simpler in many ways in regards to technology, they were, I would probably imagine if you talk to the people who lived in them, where they're farming 7 days a week, sun up to sundown, without a 5-day work week, without central air, or without uh, access to high quality medical care like we have now, that they would have interpreted their lives in ways that are similar to what we're saying. I don't think they would think of themselves as being stress free. I imagine they would be stressed because
Mm-hmm.
their very survival depends on factors that are both in their control and out of their control. Stress, I think, sometimes is a very difficult thing to measure. I think that it is hard to characterize for one person what's a stressful choice and what it isn't. I'm a big sports fan, and some of my biggest, I like basketball and football, and some of the people who I admire the most in these sports are people sometimes who are able to step into a scenario where, as an average person, I would be thoroughly overwhelmed. Be at the end of a game, it's important. You have to win. You have to create some sort of play or shoot a basket or do something that is going to help the team win and help a city to get excited, not to disappoint them. And yet these people are able to function in ways that are beyond anything that I think I might be able to do. A flip side argument is like a lady came in to see me today who has a tiny little brown spot on one of her toenails. It's not something you can see,
Mm-hmm.
but she tells me that it stresses her out and she worries about it a lot. Now, I looked at it and it's nothing to worry about, but it's not something that I think that many people would look at and develop a lot of stress in regards to thinking about.
Mm-hmm.
But her, that's a very stressful environment. She raised her voice when she described it. It really is something that vexes her. And so it's a really complicated topic to try to describe what stress is. You know what it feels like, but and what things are going to be uniformly stressful to us all. Another great example I think about are people who win the lottery. Person goes from working, they win the lottery, then they win all this money, and many of them are broke a year or two later. They've had disrupted family relationships and other things, and many of them then stressed about the idea that they won the lottery and that they wish they had never won it. I just find that hard to, I have no way to understand that.
Hmm.
So I think many times trying to define this and trying to understand it and trying to give a good account as to what might be necessary to try to address this is hard.
I appreciate that. That helps me not see it just from my perspective, like how come nobody asked me what my stress level was, to understanding from a medical perspective, how do where is the diagram that shows how stress affects everyone when everyone is different, like you said.
Yes, I think I mean, we know it's physiologically a response of fight or flight, where someone's cortisol levels go up, blood pressure goes up, heart rate goes up. It has an adaptive response. It's important that we have that, and it's what's allowed us to survive over the countless hundreds and thousands of years. But it is triggered in ways that are not necessary now. We're not out in the field running from the saber-toothed tiger or from the woolly mammoth, and trying to figure out how to manage that response in regards to modern life, where the risks, despite what many of us will think, the risks of living and life expectancy are so much infinitely better than they were 200, 300, 400,000 years, 400 years ago. It's just getting that has not evolved fast enough for us.
That helps. That actually calms my brain a little bit, because it was so stressful and frustrating, and I spend so much time with my clients that are at a very heightened stress level,
Mm-hmm.
um, and trying to just do the best that I can to provide them the tools to help better their stress level, um, which
Although
is what helped me.
I just read something recently though. There's some authors I follow, or a YouTube channel I follow called Big Think, and they had a number of people on from Harvard, and they were discussing that that stress has this importance to it. It's a necessary phenomenon. We often think of it as something to be rid of, but it motivates us, it drives us, it allows us to cope, it allows us to create and do all sorts of other things. There's a external, what we perceive to be an external pressure that is driving us in ways that we think are all negative, but really can be very adaptive. And
Hmm.
so I think I am pursuing that line of thinking more and looking at some of this literature to get a sense about what that really means. I think in a perfect world, all of us thinks that if when you go on vacation, you're down somewhere nice and warm, you're sitting there and you have a drink in your hand and you're next to the pool, that is should be our normal state. We all should be about like
That'd
that's how
be
we're supposed to feel
nice.
all the time. Yeah, we're all supposed to feel this way all the time. That's when you feel the best. But human beings as a group thrive upon challenges and upon stress and the need to provide and the need to eat and the need to avoid, to have shelter and all these other things. That's what drives human development and evolution and creativity, the desire to address some of the basic needs. And when those challenges come, you don't feel blissful like you're at the side of the pool. You feel something that makes you get up and make a change such that you are better, your family's better, ultimately humankind is better.
That's it. That's it. That's the goal right there. Is one, I think, identifying it and then taking the leaning into the uncomfort, leaning into the stress and making those changes. So let's talk about some of the skin issues that you see on a, you mentioned or in your information, razor bumps being a very common issue. What kind of advice would you give to people that are struggling with that, and what kind of treatments does your practice offer?
Sure. So if you think about it, shaving is something that's almost ubiquitous throughout
Mhm.
humankind. People will remove hair from their bodies and have been doing so for a long time. What we have found is that that actual process is more challenging for some people than it is to another. If you have a very straight hair shaft, one where the hair is straight and grows out straight, you tend to have fewer problems with certain diseases than you would if your hair shaft is curly or elliptical or slightly different in shape. So when we talk about shaving, and often a lot of problems I'm seeing are the result of people whose hair shafts are curly and consequently develop complications from that when it's cut. So, for instance, you can cut it and it can dig back into the skin, it can become secondarily infected. All sorts of scarring can come as a result of those things happening. And that leads to types of problems that can be unique in people who have difficulty with shaving. Now, certainly, there are plenty of other issues that can come up in regards to people who shave. They have straighter hair too. There's inflammation, there's infection, and that's across all different types of hair shapes. So many of the problems I run across are people have difficulty with shaving on the face, and sometimes complications in the scalp, as well as other skin diseases that start off presenting in the scalp and leading to other complications. For instance, you have something like lupus, which is an autoimmune disease. It can show up anywhere on the body, but it can show up in the scalp. And when we see it in the scalp, it has a certain way of look. So in our practice, we do focus on treating shaving related issues as well as other practices do. It's not something unique to our practice. And we talk about how to go about shaving, how often to change blades when shaving, what sort of technique to use, what sorts of shave cream to use. And those who are having particularly difficult times with shaving can end up with things like laser hair removal, which can be helpful, waxing, electrolysis. There are many options available. So I think that each person has to be diagnosed and seen, and some of those recommendations may apply to them, and we certainly are capable of offering options for treatment here in our office.
So you mentioned like how frequently you should change your razor. What's an average use, just in general? I know men and women were different. Our skin, just like say for me, an average woman who shaves her arms, her legs, her underarms, her is there a general answer?
So I think I can give you a general answer, but there are many variables included. So let's say, for instance, you have really fine hair. When you shave, you do not affect the blade in the same way than if you have very coarse hair. Perfect example is people who shave their underarms versus shaving the hair on their face. Some people have very thin hair here, very thick hair in underarms, private area, places like that. And you can tell the difference in that caliber of hair when you're shaving. Every time you shave using a blade, you're taking a sharp blade and you are making it dull. Each time it passes, it's becoming duller and duller. Not only that, you are adding bacteria to a sterile blade. Now you have the second time you shave, you have a duller blade, has bacteria on it, and that is a more challenging way of starting shaving than it is if you have a fresh blade. think all of us can tell the difference when we shave with a blade that we use more than once versus one that's new. I use a general recommendation of once a week for changing a blade. Now, there are many types of blades. There are some blades that are just single blades, and then there are blades that have as many as 6 different blades all at the same time. That comes in as a consideration. 6 blades shaving your skin is going to take less strokes, and perhaps it degrades the 6 blades less, not quite as quickly. Which part of your body are you shaving? Are you shaving the face? Shaving the scalp? Are you shaving the private area? That too has an impact. What kind of shave cream do you use? A good shave cream that's thick and has a nice decreases friction. Again, it's going to make it easier for that blade to do its job than if you are, some people I found out are dry shaving. They just take things and shave without any sort of soap or shave cream. That factors in it to it as well. But I like to say once a week because I think people ask the question you ask, and I like to give a number. I think if you did once a week and you were, clean the blade afterwards, do the best you could, and your hair is not too coarse, that's reasonable. But there are a lot of factors that go into play. I probably have to shave daily. I don't have much of a beard, but there are people who shave a couple times a day. And some people come in with just the most coarse hair. It's amazing. I don't think they can make it a week with an average blade. So, and then choice of blade, as I said, has something to do with it. 6 blades is different than 1 blade. So I like the question. It's an excellent question. I think I would say once a week, but you may need to adjust based on a lot of factors. And the idea that you need to switch. There are people who are using blades for months, a month at a time. They're trying to save money. I think I'd find other ways to save money than cutting back on how often you change your blade when you shave.
Thank you. I appreciate that insight. Good to know. Always good to know. It's all about education and information.
Yes.
Let's shift over to skin cancer, which is something, you know, skin cancer awareness is crucial for everyone. I have a good friend that just had a large amount of skin cancer removed from his face. He expected it to be similar to the first time he had skin cancer removed from his face. This one was much more invasive, a much bigger area, different growing, um, but it seems to be, from the information I read on your website and other information, that it seems very overlooked in communities of color. How do you approach this in your practice, and what should listeners know about skincare risks?
Sure. So back to that conversation we had about Fitzpatrick types, how dark or light skin is. I think that based upon things I've read and studies I've seen, the darker the skin type, the less likely you are to have skin cancer. But it is not zero. On average, from a study I read, it's quite old study, probably about 40 years old at this point, but they gave a general number of about the average person of color has about 1/10 the risk of a person who is not Fitzpatrick 4 to 6 greater. So I think I don't know if that number is accurate, but certainly what it tries to represent is that the lighter you are, the greater chance you are of having skin cancer. People have migrated around the world from different locations, having evolved in certain areas where the sun risks are greater or lesser. And the leading country for skin cancer per capita is Australia. Think about how Australia has been populated. You had a group of indigenous brown people living there, and then we have visitors coming from other continents, subsequently came over and took over the country and established themselves there in a new environment. Consequently, the skin there, for many of the very light people, has not evolved to be able to manage the more intense sun that has happened as a result of being there for generations and generations, hundreds, thousands of years. So the risk of skin cancer there is greater than it is in many other locations. You think of skin cancer as being, there are 3 major types that we talk about in the United States. There's basal cell carcinoma, There's squamous cell carcinoma, there's melanoma. We associate them with sun exposure to a great extent, and that certainly is the case. But there are people who develop melanoma in sites that the sun never sees. It can be in the retina, the lining of the brain, the otic canal, all sorts of places where sun doesn't occur. And so we know that sun does increase your risk, but it's not necessarily the only factor in direct exposure to skin. So we counsel people in general to say that you need to protect yourself against the sun when you are out. I give this conversation about talking about the historic observation. So I'll give you a quick summary of this. If you went back and looked at magazines back in the beginning of the 20th century, when they showed ideal beauty, oftentimes that was a person who was very fair in skin. And what that was supposed to mean was that many people who had very light skin were people who were very wealthy and prosperous. They were not working outside. People who had darker skin were people who were working outside more and tended to be of lower socioeconomic caste. As you look at some of those fashion magazines as they move towards the mid 20th century, you start to see people looking browner and browner. And it represented a change in how people viewed darker skin, because it meant that for many people in poor climates where it was icy and cold and snowy, they could take vacations to these exotic places where the sun is nicer and you were avoiding the ice and snow. So people tended to look a little browner, and it became a representation of health and beauty in a way that didn't exist many generations before. And so that beauty ideal has evolved over time, and the tan now is associated with a sign of health and beauty. One of the leading causes of skin cancer among young people right now is the use of the tanning bed. The single biggest event that leads to the use of a tanning bed is the prom. So people will choose to tan around the prom. It's the number one reason people do it. It's not that people don't do it before and after, but that seems to be the thing that triggers people the most. Increasingly, melanoma is being diagnosed in people at younger ages as a result of, one, some of this behavior, and number two, the fact that people have access to dermatologic care now in a way that they didn't 40 years ago, 50 years ago. It's easier to get to see a dermatologist. We do more. There are more of us. So that is also increasing risk. And so the numbers of skin cancers in the United States has gone up, both for a lot of reasons. Second issue we think about is leisure time. People have more leisure time than they used to. In the beginning of the 20th century, on average, people work 6 days a week. You had a day off for Sunday, and you work 6 days a week. Now people have much more leisure time than they have ever had. And consequently, they're able to, instead of sitting in the office, they can get outside and they can go and bike, and they can swim, and they can do all sorts of fun things outside in a way that didn't exist in the same way when people were in the beginning part of the early 20th century. So a lot of factors have led to the increase in skin cancer. Skin cancer is the number one cancer in the United States. On average, we think it's about 1 million cancers a year. Now, the bulk of them are easily treated and cured, but there are some that lead to death. And with melanoma being the most aggressive type, and probably squamous cell being number 2, and basal cell being number 3.
Thank you for all that information and all the different things to consider that have changed over time. I know that even going into a gym now, most gyms have tanning beds, and that's like a perk that's included, and it's something that they promote. Um, so it's, again, I think it goes to education and making sure that the population is educated on the risks associated with using tanning beds, and to protect yourself if you're out enjoying those leisure activities, and how important it is.
Yes, I think that we find that people generally like to be tan. They feel healthier and they feel more attractive when they have a bit of a tan. And that's something that is, a decision by society in general. The bulk of the sun that you get in your lifetime occurs, 80% of the sun you get under 20 years of age in your lifetime. That's a statistic that I've quoted. And that says a lot about what's going on. You have more leisure time, you can go out and play sports, you have time off and things. Despite the fact young people feel very busy, they will be busier. And that leads to the fact you're going to be in the house more, in the office more. And so you don't get a chance to spend as much time outdoors. So those are things to think about in that regard. Sunscreen is an important thing to use. Sunscreen, what I tell people though, sunscreen is not the equivalent of shade though. Shade is the absence of getting sun. Sunscreen is something you put on and you measure how long it takes for you to turn red. So along the way, you are absorbing certain sun rays. If I say SPF of 15, it means it takes me 15 times longer using that particular sunscreen to burn than it would if I didn't. But ultimately, you do burn. So the goal is to use sunscreen appropriately and frequently. Ideally, you reapply it every 2 hours. You'd want something that's the SPF of 15 and above, and ideally something that stays on well, especially if you're going to be outside where you're going to be sweating or swimming. People often want the really simple ones you spray on, it looks like water and makes for better pictures. Yet those things are easily removed if you sweat. So I think that those are things you have to take into consideration when you're deciding how to choose a sunscreen. There had been some controversy about the use of sunscreen, and some people looked at these large databases and came to the conclusion that using sunscreen was increasing your risk of having skin cancer. It's more of a statistical anomaly. It looked like there's no cause and effect to it, but there's some debate with some people about the use of sunscreen. They don't feel like they want to really use sunscreen. Much rather just take the risks that they take. And so I highly recommend sunscreen, a good one that stays on well, at least 15. People will say, well, doesn't mean I need to use 30, 40, 50, 60. The difference between 15 and 30 is not twice the protection. It would seem that way. It's really maybe an additional 2-3 percentiles on the bell-shaped curve as to where, or the parabola, that as to how much protection you get. So yes, it's great to use the strongest one you have. You don't have to use one that's 40, 50, 60, but at least 15 and above.
That's great. That, again, very appreciated knowledge and information for our listeners and for everyone. Because I don't think you just go to the store and you pick up and you think, okay, 30, that's good. I'm going to be in the water, in the lake, or whatever. So it's nice to really truly understand more about what you're purchasing, how often you need to reapply it. I know it comes out in the news that during the summer months they talk about it, especially kids in the pools and all that stuff. But I think we have as much sun here. We're in New Mexico, so we have
Wow.
350 plus days a year of sunshine.
What a wonderful state that must be.
It's a dry desert, but we do have blue skies and lots of sun all year round.
That sounds great. I need to visit in Mexico before I've been to Santa Fe and Taos. I would love to visit in Albuquerque. I'd love to visit again.
Good. We'd love to have you here. Let's talk about your holistic approach to skincare and how blending skincare and wellness really enhances overall patient outcomes.
Sure. I think this is a tricky topic. It's not as easily defined in terms of me being able to point to studies and say what I think is the best choices, but I think common sense plays into this type of conversation. You mentioned things before about stress. We talked about sunscreen and a number of things so far. Your skin is an organ like every other organ in the body. It's easier to see than most organs, but it often reflects the underlying health of what's going on inside. There are some great studies to show that, for instance, if you're a smoker, you're going to age your skin faster. You're going to wrinkle faster. You are going to heal slower than someone that doesn't smoke. And we would inherently think of smoking as a bad thing for us anyway. You die of lung cancer, all sorts of complications. So that's an example of how general health is important to how your skin looks. Many of the things I'm going to say are things that we would just normally take for granted. Of course, it's important that people get adequate amounts of sleep. It helps with their other underlying cardiovascular health and other things. And cardiovascular health is important for the skin. Of course, it's important that people eat a healthy diet. There are countless studies that point to that show that eating a healthy diet that includes primarily fruits and vegetables is good for your general overall health. And if your lungs are doing well, your heart's doing well, your liver doing well, your skin is doing well. And so, again, it's often a reflection of the kind of general health that you have inside. It's important to get exercise and to adequately run and to get your cardiovascular health to be good and raise your blood pressure up and your heart rate up and to help your heart. And your heart is what provides the blood that's necessary to nourish the skin. So there are a number of things that you can point to that we would say in general we want people to do that can reflect directly onto how your skin looks. We talked about sun protection. That one is directly related to the skin, and not indirectly, but directly related to the skin. So many of these are things that we all have heard. So oftentimes we hear things, but we don't necessarily do things. And it is, embracing that type of a lifestyle can help you generally with your health and some areas specifically for your skin health as well.
Yeah, definitely. We're all one body, mind, body, and soul. As long as we're taking care of all our parts, it's even the same with like mental health and physical health, emotional health. It's all connected.
Mm-hmm.
And the more you can do to benefit all those areas, the more benefit radiates out through your whole body.
Mm-hmm. Yes,
So,
I completely agree.
environmental factors, there's so much you can do about that. But again, just protecting yourself, protecting your skin um, is very important. I know that we're getting ready to go camping, and one of the things we both laid out for ourselves was long sleeve shirts and long pants, even though it's fairly warm. If we plan on doing any hiking while we're out and about, gotta protect the skin.
Yes. Is it cool in the evening where you're going?
Um, right now, I think it's fairly cool. We're gonna be kind of more mountainous, so it's gonna be in the 70s. Evenings will probably drop to the low 60s,
Mm-hmm.
maybe even a little lower because of the altitude.
Yes, that sounds good. Sounds ideal.
I can't wait. We're leaving early tomorrow morning. I'm so excited.
Good for you.
Um, and I love it. Again, these are all things that are all directly connected. So it's so important to consider all of those things and for us to do our part to nourish our whole body.
Mm-hmm. Yes, absolutely.
So innovation is a key part of your practice. Um, are there any advanced treatments or products that you're particularly excited about that cater to diverse skin types, or just kind of new stuff that's coming up?
I think that some of the devices we've brought into our aesthetic practice are going to be really helpful for people of all different skin types. Everything I've discussed so far, we've focused a bit more on people with some of the darker skin types, but they apply to everyone. They work as well in patients who have their Fitzpatrick 1 to 3 skin types as it does 4 to 6, maybe even better. But some of the new laser devices, we have one that's called a Pico laser, which is very good at delivering energy, and it can help with wrinkles and dark spots and tattoos and all sorts of things. Those are things that we're excited about using and expanding them to certain populations. We have a device called the Morpheus 8 that we have been trying to use to help with various types of difficult skin diseases, such as hidradenitis and keloids, things that are really challenging, incredibly challenging diseases. And so we're trying to explore how well these things work in regards to some of the diseases that we found particularly challenging for people of all skin types, and certainly for people who have some of the darker skin types.
Interesting. I'll have to look some of those up to learn more about them.
Mm-hmm.
Um, let's see. Your bio mentioned inclusivity. It's such a wonderful word. Something that is, I think it's very much more on the topic of conversation around the world now, which is wonderful. How do you ensure that your practice remains inclusive and attentive to the needs of diverse patient populations? I love how when we're talking, you're talking about all over the world, and I think that's wonderful.
Sure. So that's a very good question. I think that I have a very small practice, and I'm fortunate enough to be able to be a part of every aspect of it and to watch and monitor and examine and to get a pulse for what's happening in the small area that we have here in North Carolina. One of the things that I think that happens first and foremost in regards to inclusivity is that when you walk in my office, I talk about these things, but the office reflects that. Our office reflects the diverse environment that we live in. We live in Durham, North Carolina, or I practice in Durham, North Carolina, where Duke University is located. And this is a place that draws people from all over the world for issues of both business and education and opportunity. And so I oftentimes just the fact that people walk into the door and see that it is a place that looks a bit different than most of the other places around, that I think is a first way of introducing people to the idea of inclusivity. Secondly, I make it my point to highlight to the staff and to the patients as well that in this particular setting, we are going to make it a priority to be sure that we treat people in a respectful manner, regardless of who they are. The word inclusivity, DEI, that terrible word that people have just sort of turned into almost a curse word, means letting everyone have an opportunity. It means including everybody. And I think that it's important for us to make sure that we treat all people equally when they come into this office. And I cannot control the world, but I can have some say in what happens in this particular setting. Fortunately, the idea of making sure that everyone has access to things has become a hot button issue. When it wasn't that way, there were people who were denied things and not given opportunities to have access to some of the healthcare benefits or places in government or jobs. The bulk of the population really didn't necessarily see the need to change that. Yet you have people who are citizens of the United States, and they pay the same taxes. Children go to school, and they want for them the same thing that everybody wants for their families. And so part of what I try to do is I discuss these things. Sometimes with the staff, I discuss issues of broader concerns outside the office. And the importance of making sure that we treat everyone well. Uh, it's not often I fire people, and I don't even like talking about things like that. But one of the quickest ways to be reprimanded here is to mistreat a patient. That it doesn't happen often because I make it very clear. And people see how, and I try to set an example of how that should look. And there are moments I have to pull people aside and we have to talk to them about how to address people and how to address them in a respectful manner, regardless of how they may behave. And that is something that's a very important topic. It's as if you were to walk through my office and look at my staff, look at the art on my wall, look at my website. I try to make it reflect the world around me that I live in and that many of us live in. And I don't see that as necessarily a bad thing. Bothers some people. I've even had patients bring it to my attention. Your website looks different than the other websites. Yes, it does. Yes, it does look that way. It looks more like what you see when you drive down the street and less of like what you ideally would like to see. So I think just making sure that's a priority. Also being, obviously looking at, if you can see me, I'm a man of color, and it's obvious just walking in that setting that I am someone that falls into those concerns as well. It's not true for all people of color, but certainly this particular person of color, yes, I am pushing to make sure that this country lives up to the ideals that it was founded upon. And sticking to the ideals that were what the founding fathers put together to build a country like America.
It's wonderful. It's great. And, like I said, I did look at your website and I liked it very much. Um,
I have had
I
patients again call me and they're unhappy about some of these things. Or
can't please everyone.
no, you can't, and I don't aim to. And
Yep.
uh, yeah, I've got some issues I have to deal with. There are some people we can't please, and we're not. We just decide we should need to part ways. So there are plenty of other options beyond us. We are not perfect, and so people need to seek and find the medical home for them that's best.
I think that goes for a lot of things. You got to find whatever works for you. I'm not everybody's cup of tea, and it's part of
Yeah,
what
absolutely.
when I'm talking to people at their initial consultation, that's their time to decide if I'm the right person that they want to work with, and I may not be.
Uh, you cannot be. It is not possible. There are where I'd be suspect of anyone that everyone spoke great about. They can't be saying much. They can't have very many opinions that would reflect anything. So I certainly agree with you. I'm not everyone's cup of tea. I'm not by a long ways.
So let's talk about this new practice. Like I said, it's fairly new, correct? 6 months ish or a little over.
We
No,
opened
we're in
so it's
August.
probably approaching 10 months.
Yeah.
But yes, it's really a division of our original business. It's just a space that we've created to focus on aesthetics, and it's called Clearskin Wellness Aesthetics. Uh, and in that setting, people can come in and learn about procedures, techniques, and things that can help make their skin more healthy, and also to help them to enhance their appearance. So I think we're excited. We are excited about it. We have made it a point of having that setting again reflect many of the same philosophy that I have. If you were to walk into my setting for my aesthetics, these very large pictures on the wall, they're probably about 2 feet by 3 feet of women, and they are in a very stylistic sort of abstract kind of way, but certainly you can look at, and there's a wide range of people, of women from all backgrounds in there. And it's an attempt to reflect the wonderful diversity that exists in the area where we are, and to remind people that our practice is dedicated towards being inclusive and welcoming to everyone, giving everyone an opportunity to come in to learn about some of our services. And so we've been very happy, and it's a growing slowly, and every month is just a real challenge and exciting new chapter for our business, and we've been very pleased with that.
I think it's wonderful. And I can see how that would really stand out, make people feel welcome. I think as people feel welcomed and seen and heard, word of mouth alone will just carry through, people talking about how your office is and how they felt coming into that space and working with you and your wonderful staff.
Yes, thank you. We certainly are working hard to provide an environment like that.
I think that's wonderful. So, lastly, what advice would you give to all listeners seeking to improve their skincare routine, regardless of their skin type?
I think that one of the things I like to discuss with patients is the need to keep it simple. If you are a person who follows skincare, or if you pay attention to Instagram or any of these other things that focus on TikTok and all these sorts of things where people seem to get almost all their information nowadays, there's just countless things to consider. Skin needs basic things. It needs moisturization when it's dry, it needs to be clean with something gentle. And there are things we can do in an effort to perhaps enhance it, be it retinols, retinoids, things that are able to help maybe enhance the skin a bit. But I find that as a result of all the bombardment of advertising and things that people often are using just countless things from all sorts of sources, and it's from this one item to the next item to the next item, from this fad to that fad, and it really makes things complicated. I think that in general, people just need a gentle cleanser, so hopefully something without fragrance, not with too many ingredients, a gentle moisturizer that has a sunscreen in it that they can apply in the mornings, and washing the face a couple times a day. And I really think that's about all you need to focus on at the moment. Granted, if you go into some of the more popular department stores, you'll find people are selling just countless things. They tell you all sorts of things. Those things can be fun and exciting, or fun to be involved with, but not necessary depending on what they are. So you don't have to spend a lot of money. You don't have to use all these different steps. Have people come in and have like 4, 5, 6 steps. It's probably too many for the average person. So it would be nice to consult maybe a healthcare skin specialist. That can be an esthetician or perhaps a dermatologist, and further recommendations can be given.
Those are all great suggestions. And yeah, I'm very lucky to have an esthetician that works right next door. She has a great spa. And I think even times when I've met with her, she's kind of the same mindset, keep it simple. It doesn't have to be this 20, 30-minute routine. Knowing that people they're less likely to do those things if it takes too much time, or so it's good
Hard
to
to
know.
maintain that. Yes, hard to maintain 6 steps. That's just a lot.
Mm-hmm. And all different kinds of bottles, and the prices go up and up and up and up, and um, so yeah, she's kind of that same, keep it simple, protect your skin, keep it moisturized. Um, that's great. It has been an absolute pleasure having you on my podcast. Your dedication to inclusivity and innovation and patient care is truly inspiring.
I
Um,
appreciate those words. That's very kind of you.
Thank you so much for sharing all of your insight. I took lots and lots of notes. I will do my best to try to include a lot of this in the show notes. Just real quick information, where can people find you? And I'm going to make sure that all of that information is included in the show notes.
Sure. So you can reach us at our website. It's ncdermatology.com, ncdermotolgy.com. And there's a link there too that connects you to our aesthetic center. So if you'd like to hear a little bit more or learn a little bit more about what we do, that's a great place to start.
And the other one is the nccwaesthetics.com.
It is cwaesthetics.com, but you can access both of them from each other at each website.
Okay. And you are on some of the socials, Facebook, Instagram.
Yes, you can look us up, CWA, Clearskin Wellness Aesthetics. We have TikTok, we have Instagram, Facebook. The same with our NCDerm, NCDERM. Again, same thing for that the medical aspect of our practice.
Great. I will get all that updated. I had some extra stuff on here, so I'll make sure that's taken care of. Thank you again. Thank you for your time. Thank you to my listeners for tuning in. And remember, happiness is just a tap away. Until next time, stay happy and healthy. And thank you again so much. It was such a pleasure speaking with you.
Thank you.
You have a great afternoon and a wonderful holiday weekend.
You too.
Thank you. Bye-bye.